Lateral hip hinge with reach. What we're doing here is getting a little more movement in the frontal plane. So the sagittal plane is when we go up and down. You can think about like a squat, a push-up, a deadlift, but when we go side to side, that's a little more frontal plane. And we are getting frontal plane opening at the back of the hip, which is really, really nice because we don't do a lot of that on the wall. If you think about what we do on the wall, it's kind of a lot more of this right here. So making sure that we really get the back of the hip to open in the frontal plane before we can get on the wall is a really great way to make sure we have access to all of the ranges of motion in our hip that we need. So what we're going to do here is we are doing a hip hinge, but we're adding just a little bit of rotation to it. We want to make sure that at the bottom of the hip hinge, we haven't let our hip come outside of our knee, and we also haven't let our hip come inside of our knee. We want to think about our hip being stacked right on top of our knee. Now, in order to make this happen, most of the time, we are going to need a little bit of rotation. Now, the rotation needs to come from the other hip. Okay, we want to make sure that when we are hinging, we have that knee over the midfoot, nice and grounded through the tripod foot, and our upper body is really nice and stacked, ribs down, deep core up. We've let the glutes open up, okay? So this is just a regular standard hinge. But when I add that little bit of rotation to it, the rotation is coming from the opposite side of the pelvis, and it's not led by just the rib cage, okay? So I know it's kind of a lot, just hang with me. You're gonna get into your regular hinge. Notice that my feet are pretty far apart. They are way wider than hip width distance apart. My leg that's hinging, I want that heel facing forward, big toe facing forward. I need my heel to be right behind my big toe. I don't want it inside or outside of it. So right here, and then we are going to get that kneecap to also face forward. Now from here, if you'll notice, if you look at me right here, this left side of my hip, it's a little bit outside of my knee. So what I need to do is I need to take this right side of my hip and I'm gonna bring it forward just a little bit, okay? Now, my hip is stacked right on top of my knee. And when I brought that right hip forward, yes, it turned my torso slightly to the left, and that is okay, it is fine. We don't need to then try and twist back the other way, okay? So we're just gonna let our torso follow our hip. Now from here, I'm keeping my hinge, but I also want to keep that hip right on top of the knee, and I can kind of press gently into that knee to make sure I don't let it fall in, okay? So I'm just pressing ever so slightly to make sure that I can keep that tripod foot. I'm keeping the kneecap really going forward towards the midfoot, and I keep that hip stacked right on top of all of it. When you do this right, what you are going to feel is an opening on the back side of your hip. Very similar to a hip hinge, but you may even feel it a little more intensely in this position. And to show you the other side, when I go to do a lateral hinge on my right side, what happens when I let my hip go back is it goes way outside of my knee, okay? So you can see my knees right here and my hips right here. What I want to do is, I'm gonna make sure that big toe's facing forward, so I actually had to like kind of spin my foot a little bit to make sure I've got big toe and heel in a parallel line. Now I'm going to take my hip and keeping my knee in the same spot, let that left hip come forward some so my right hip can get stacked right here on top of my knee. My knee is over the midfoot, but look at this nice line that I have right here going big toe, kneecap, hip. And then from here, we're really just using this in the warm up to make sure we get the back of the hips open, because so many times as climbers, again, we're on the wall in this externally rotated position, and it can really cause us to have a little more shortening of those deep hip external rotators. So this is just a great way of kind of opening that area up before we get on the wall. My favorite way to do it is just to kind of get into the position, take an inhale and an exhale, and then come out and then go back again, inhale, exhale, and I do that for about 5 times on each side, and I'm really just kind of looking to feel. I literally put my hand on my butt, and when I'm in that position, I feel like, do I feel this kind of lengthening right here on an inhale, and I'm making sure I get that deep core up on an exhale, and then I call it good. 5 reps of an inhale and an exhale on both sides. So I get here, inhale, exhale, stand up, go again, inhale, exhale, stand up, and then repeat on the other side. All right, that is your lateral hip hinge with reach.